Okay, so SilentEgo, another podcast, and we have a very special guest today, Jeremy Langmead, who is fundamentally former editor of Esquire, Wallpaper, the Sunday Times Style magazine, and fundamentally he was co-founder of the global men's e-tailer, Mr. Porter. So for all of our listeners today, we have a real soul entrepreneur, Jeremy, and he's going to talk about his story. And of recent, he's launched an amazing book for all of us to actually really start to think about sharpening our personal brands and how we look and the rising times. And the book is called Vainglorious, and it's absolutely fantastic. So it's time to be seen, be heard, and be recognised. And Jeremy's going to lead the dance today in relation to his story, why he's written the book and the history behind it. And Jeremy, welcome. And I really sort of say, look, it's a privilege to have you on our podcast. But it's a stock question. How did it all begin? Where you are today with life and championing men's, can I call it men's grooming, and our appearance matters, and that whole travel. Yeah.
All the unimportant things in life.
Yeah.
I've dedicated my life to everything that doesn't truly matter.
Right. Yeah.
Which I've come to terms with. It's fine. I mean, my actual career was, as with lots of things in life, began by accident. I was studying fashion at Central St. Martin's School of Art, and it was about 3 days before the degree course finished. I hadn't a clue what I was going to do, and the phone rang in the fashion department secretary's office, and she was really, really old. She must have been in her 80s, and she never got to the phone in time. So I thought, I'll pick it up for her, save Jessie running for the phone. And it was someone from the Sunday Times saying, "Oh, hi, we were wondering if you could recommend anyone. We're looking for a sub-editor to work on a new magazine, News International." And rather selfishly and cheekily, I recommended someone called Jeremy Langmead, and only sent myself to the interview. So I ended up as a sub-editor, not knowing what a sub-editor was, and being the only candidate. So I cheated rather, and that's how my career started.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really good. So that obviously you've worked.
So it's just a lucky break. Yeah.
Yeah, but we all need that, don't we? And I suppose in some respects, say, if you don't mind me saying, the industry sector that you've represented with your your professional career is a very competitive one, and some of the the editorial, Esquire, Wallpaper, these are big brand names, and you must have seen some experienced some very interesting times. But what led you into thinking about men's grooming in the book? Because it's obviously quite a detail, but it's not just about, if you don't mind me saying, the synthetic side of it. You're coming at it from a number of perspectives, outside in and inside out. It's got a real, it's got a lot of essence to it.
So, yes. Well, I think obviously having edited Esquire and also edited women's magazines too. And then when we launched Mr. Porter, and what's great about an e-commerce company, of course, is with an online business, you have a dialogue with your consumer daily, every minute, every second. So the feedback we got from our customers, whether it was via Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or through the personal customer service, we just found out so much about what men liked, what they didn't like about themselves, and what they wanted to be told and advised about. And there's a particular generation of men, I think my generation and the ones above and even below, who we don't ask each other those questions. Blokes don't ask blokes about, "Oh, nice jacket, where'd you get that from?" And it's that weird thing, as there was no one really for us to turn to. And I always notice, like when you go to a wedding, when you walk into the wedding, and all the women will say, "God, you look amazing. Those shoes are fantastic. Where'd you get your hair done?" And then the men will look at each other and go, "Yeah, all right," as if we're a bit embarrassed that we're dressed up to go to a wedding. Yeah. And I think luckily the web's changed that, because we're now able to ask these questions anonymously, because, as a gender, I think men have got very fragile egos. We're terrified about looking stupid or getting something wrong. And the web has allowed us to ask all these questions and get the answers without anyone knowing we've asked that question. And I think that's why e-commerce companies and the web and all the social media platforms have made it a lot easier for men to find out and ask questions that they wouldn't normally ask of each other.
If you look at, so in some respects, the internet has created, sort of what I would term as open-hearted conversation, and people are becoming much more expressed behind the screen, which is quite interesting. I mean, the internet obviously is allowing you that freedom in some ways. I mean, obviously quite a contentious subject with the way the world's geared at the minute, but I mean, I know this from a client I've got. I'm involved with, who's an online business called Web Trends Optimize, and they're seeing such a rise of retailers now, coming online with their products. And I suppose in some respects you were, your career is sort of pre that and post and now live for that next generation of, new products to market, lots of, if you don't mind me saying, men's products, men's communities, different genders now hooking up, lots of open-hearted conversations. And I think that, dare I say it, men are now starting, I definitely can see this. I'm in my 50s and I've never looked after myself so much over the last 24 months because I've had the time to do it. And I am reaching out for things that make me look better on the screen, but equally make me feel better. And I know your book really does endorse that. You can, come at it from so many different perspectives. And I know that, you are bringing a skin range out as well at some point, Jeremy, as well. So it'd be good to just expand on all of this. It's quite a thing, isn't it, at the minute? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And as you say, it's been such a huge change. When I used to work at the Sunday Times, and as you said earlier, I was editing the Style magazine, and I used to dread weekly conference because you'd sit in the conference, it was very old school, very macho, quite antagonistic environment back then. And you'll get the foreign editor reading about all the atrocities happening, and then the home news editor reading about all the awful things that are happening. And then they'd say, Jeremy, what have we got in style? And I'd say, we've got some lovely dresses and a nice piece about Lady Diana. And it was always slightly mortifying because it was so seen as the girl's end of the newspaper that was being edited by a man. And that has changed so much. Some of the biggest influencers on makeup today are actually male YouTubers, have millions and millions of followers. But I think what's good today and makes me happier is that it's about choice. If you don't want to care about your appearance, that's so fine. And in fact, I envy the people who don't care about their appearance. Life must be so much more relaxing. But if you do, you shouldn't be made to feel bad about it. And that's what I want to do with the book. And since the book came out, I probably get maybe 10 DMs a day on Instagram from complete strangers just asking me about, where can you have a hair transplant? How do I hide the bags under my eyes? Should I have Botox? And or can I wear a concealer? And I'm just so happy that these guys feel that they can ask me, and that there's now sort of forums where they can find out these things. But the fact that these people are messaging a complete stranger, and okay, I'm now there to come as an expert, but just shows there's still quite a lot of a way to go before it's easily found, all this information.
I think it's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, congratulations on creating a community by accident of, Q&A on men's appearance and obviously giving some great advice. But aren't we in a time now? Obviously, I call it the COVID times. I don't want to go on too much about the specific subject of COVID, but equally about how we are becoming more expressed. We're more self-expressed. We are, not all of us, but some of us has got more time on our hands. We're constrained, obviously, with things like travel and things. So aren't we pointing back into ourselves and saying, how can I feel good about myself today? And I mean, I know personally what I've done is, I'm a bit of a rituals and routines guy anyway. And, even things like scents, like smells and things are so important to me. And, because I haven't been able to go to the Med this year, I bought myself some Sicilian lemon candles, so they actually, the place smells of lemons. It gives me that feeling I've gone away. And then you kind of, okay, we've got some weather, but I mean, I think, it's sort of, in some respects, you do touch on this in your book, but it's about that sort of being able to express yourself and get to know yourself at a new level as well. There's a nice psychological benefit to this. Would you agree?
I think so, yes. And as you say, sort of during lockdowns, we whether we wanted or not, we did stare at our own faces in the corner of Zoom screens until we realised we could switch that bit off. And so we did suddenly look at our faces, whether we wanted to or not, for a lot more, and suddenly thought, God, I look really furious, or I look really pale, or I look really old, or my hairline's gone much further back than I'd actually noticed. And so it did point out some things that perhaps we wouldn't have focused on before, which it wasn't necessarily a good thing. But now that we know about them, at least there's something we can do about it. But I think you should only do these things if if it makes you feel good, and that's why I've been really when I write a piece for the Times, I write a grooming column for the Times as well as a style column, and whenever you write about a treatment for men, there's always the same group of trolls, I suppose is the only way to call them. But I quite like them because they're such grumpy old trolls. But they are furious that I've recommended that you could have a hair transplant, or that you could have Botox, or that you could have a laser treatment that'll make your pigmentation look a bit smoother. And they hate me for it. And they hate the fact that some men care about how they look and then do something about it. And it's those people that I'm sort of fighting against, I think. It should be about choice. So and that's what's happening today. People are choosing their genders, and so we should be able to choose how we look too.
Definitely, and I think it's timely. I think it's a fantastic thing to express, and in some respects, sort of lead a slightly new movement. That it is important to sort of. I believe it's a personal view, and maybe that's my choice. Yes, without question. But it's also, I think, it's a direct reflection on. If I look at my spiritual side, what's missing in the world right now, not everywhere, but I'll say it to make the point, is love. Okay, and that starts at home. So therefore, love is where home is where the heart is, and I think looking after yourself and sort of aesthetically looking after yourself is a good thing, because it's sort of if you love yourself, you can love another. And if you feel good about yourself, that sort of makes other people happy as well. And if you look at beauty as an example, we all I think most of us like beautiful things. And, so sometimes I think your grumpy audience, they might have a nice Bentley in the drive, but actually don't really look after themselves. I don't see the link, So...
No, I know, and we more of us are having to work later in life and date later in life, and so there is more reasons to look as good as you can. And often how you look is a reflection of how you feel. The skin's the biggest organ in the body, and it reflects what's happening inside the body too. So it's quite a good barometer of whether you're healthy or not. But it isn't even just about skin. I mean, it's just that if you feel a bit hungover, just put on a pale blue shirt, or if you don't want to go to a gym, just put on a well-cut blazer, because it just gives you the perfect shoulder and a great waist, and it takes no effort apart from buying the blazer itself. It's much cheaper than a personal trainer. So there's just lots of really easy little tricks you can do to get the best out of yourself and feel good about yourself, as you said.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, one of the things that, we're now been 18 months ago when we weren't doing as much communication through the screens. I call it the Glassroom, or your theatre to express yourself. I've got to be candid. I've actually noticed, there is a divide where some people are actually improving on the screen, meaning, they are starting to look after themselves a little bit more because they're caring about their appearance. And yes, there's definitely a pardon the language, a tribe out there that don't care. But I think it matters. And one of our kind of strap lines for our business, Agility.life, which is a big part of that process, is personal branding professionally, is being able to sort of stand out and get noticed, which is all related to employment. But I think people that look after themselves and can communicate that and convey that is they get employed. I mean, there's lots of benefits to looking after yourself, pardon the language, but commercially as well. There's an old adage, isn't it? Pretty people get hired. I'm not saying that that is what you're championing here, but equally, you've got an angle on that. And it's important,
I think so. Just feel good about looking good, and don't be embarrassed. And we all carp a bit about when we see the contestants on Love Island and those girls with the giant inflatable lips. And personally, I don't think they look great. But if those girls like their lips like that, and if their boyfriends like their lips like that, then good luck to them, is what I say. And I think we've just got to be a bit less judgy about different people's journeys to how they want to look. And we might not agree with it, but it's their choice. And if they're happy, then great that they have the giant lips. I genuinely mean that. And so we've got to respect what makes people feel good about themselves. And as you say, there's often other benefits to that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, given that obviously this is something that it's very clear that you're passionate about. It's a true direction that you've took, particularly with the book and the way that you've expressed everything. Where do you see the kind of future? I think this is going to be a seriously big trend from your point of view. Is it going to really grow? Is there going to be the land of the pretty people and the land of the not? I mean, how do you see it playing out over the next 5 to 10 years? I can only see it growing. That's my view. Because, I think...
Yeah. It's a good question. I think the men's skincare market, for example, is forecast to quadruple over the next few years. It's massive. And in China and the rest of Asia, men's skincare is really, really big. And obviously, as is men's makeup, in Korea and in China, a lot of men wear makeup. And that's heading over here, which might alarm some people. But already there's brands like War Paint for Men, which makes it sound very macho, which is basically a makeup brand for men. And there's another one that was just released a couple of weeks ago called Benny Hancock for Men. So there's now makeup ranges in John Lewis and available on Mr. Porter, where you can buy concealer, foundation, not eyeshadows, although they do exist, of course, but all those things that we would never dreamt of being readily available over a department store counter and a guy having delivered by Amazon on a Thursday morning. But that's only going to increase hugely. So I think we're going to be flabbergasted by how many more ways we can achieve a better looking version of ourselves. But I think it's not about looking younger is the other important thing. I don't think people should be stressed about looking older. Looking older is great. It's just about looking the best at your age, I think, is what's important, if that's what you so wish, rather than striving to look like someone else or striving to look like your own self 10 years ago, which is pointless, because there's lots of lovely things about aging, but just look good when you're aging. That's sort of what I'm arguing for, I suppose. And in a way that's always been the case, but it's just more overt now.
And I think that's great. I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, I think age doesn't count. At the end of the day, it's all about, like I say, it's all about. I think we're coming to a generation, hopefully, of we're all becoming more expressed of who we really are. And I think the last couple of years, people are really. Yes, there's some difficulties out there, I know, but I think there's people are actually going in to come out, if that makes sense. So. Sort of looking to sort of improve themselves where they can. I mean, I can speak for myself, but this year I've gone to have my teeth done recently, and people have started to comment, your teeth are really, and I've gone for the Visalign thing. I've got them in now, actually, to be perfectly honest with you, but
very good. Yeah.
So but that's important to me.
They barely show, do they? They're so good.
Exactly, and it's such it's a good thing, and as I say, we're doing a lot more virtual work, through the screens and things. And I think these small things do, for me, they count, particularly in a professional setting. But equally, if we look at online, if we look at people now are looking at certain things as props. I mean, the way we dress now, the way we're looking when we come on a screen, I think is important. It says an awful lot. because it's a kind of mini theatre, and being able to express yourself, and you're quite right to be very clear, to look right, to sound right, and feel right. But equally, I think your tone of voice, the energy that you can distribute by feeling good, has impact. And I think that that to me is all part of your, pardon the language, your movement. It's wear this, look like that, and suits have gone. I don't know about you, but I've not worn a suit. I've worn a suit once in the last 2 years. And I know we're talking about.
I know, poor suits. I think they are. They will come back. They're actually what's going to happen. In fact, it's already happening. Is the suit's going to come back as an off-duty item?
Right.
So if you look at the sort of new generation of suits coming through, they're sort of quite baggy and quite casual looking, and we'll start wearing suits again because we'll think it's fun and a bit more alternative. Because the sweatpant will become the suit of yesterday, won't it? So we'll be dying for something different to wear. And weirdly, the suit, which was a conventional piece of armoury for years, will become that off-duty, hey, this is playtime. So I think we'll see it almost swap round that leisure wear and office wear outfit.
Well, I think it's sort of... I think
and to your other point earlier about...
Sorry, Jeremy.
No, sorry. Just when you were asking about will we become when you were asking about whether we'll become generations of pretty people, I hope not is my answer to that. I think we want to be a generation of people who look and feel healthy. But what we do have to be careful is that not everyone ends up looking the same, or this idealized perfection that we see through Instagram, etc. And I don't know if you remember a comic called 2000 AD. I remember, and it was Judge Dredd, and there was a cartoon strip, and it was obviously set in the future, but this was back in the 70s or 80s, and where everyone looked the same, because all the women had plastic surgery, so they all looked beautiful and small-nosed and long blonde hair, and suddenly all began to realize, oh, but we all look the same. So then people were going to visit plastic surgeons to have scars cut into their face, or an eye moved into a slightly different part of their head, which obviously won't happen, and it's a very extreme version. but it is a warning that we also have to keep our individual character and not become too like everyone else.
So that's a very interesting point, actually, because I know with our Zengility.life business, we often talk about the brand of the individual, the personal brand, and I think your point's made about being original and authentic, and I think there's a lot of props out there online with. What I found fascinating, particularly with online clothing brands, I know Mr. Porter and the likes, some of the early pioneers of, gentlemen's clothing, etc. And, the new brands that are coming out on a weekly basis now is massive. And I actually know this with the client I'm actually working with, which is an online brand company, WebTrends, as I mentioned earlier, WebTrends Optimized. It's every week there's a brand new one, and sort of now we've got derivatives of sweatpants. So we've got all these, like, pardon the language, but all these elasticated waisted trousers. Now I can remember, sort of 25, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have seen me in them. No way. That's the sort of thing my dad used to wear, right? But they're becoming trendy. So there's kind of like...
I know.
Do you get it? And it's sort of, it's quite interesting what, the line of travel. But I think coming back to that original identity, and authenticity, and I think that's only a good thing. That you've got this self-care, you're bringing the best out.
I think it is. I think you're right. The tricky balance I think to get is sort of the Gen Zers are rightly being very strident about who they are and how they want to look and their own identity, and it's wonderful to see that happen. But I think where, and maybe you see this too with the people you work with, but there's a balance where, yes, you've got to be yourself and your truth, as everyone likes to say today. But also, I think if you're meeting with people in a work context or interviewing in a work context, it's not just about you, it's about making the person you're meeting feel comfortable. And I think it's getting that balance of, yes, this is me, but also I want you to feel comfortable talking to me, and therefore I'm going to dress in a way that will make you happy as well as myself. And it's getting that balance, isn't it? And almost the the best way to dress is to make someone feel comfortable with the way you're dressed. It's just the sort of height of good manners, to use a very old-fashioned term.
I think so, and I think it's a very good point. I mean, I have a saying: "Be remarkable, be unforgettable," and I think sometimes you can you can set a standard. You can set it too far, and it becomes frowned upon. But I think if you can set a standard, particularly, and I operate, obviously we operate in the business, high-paced, highly competitive environments, and I'm pleased to say that most of the environments we're in right now, they're shifting more to be more truthful and trusting, and we call it collaborative, versus fearful competition and big ego-driven environments. We're moving away from, moving more towards truth, trust, and collaboration. But I think equally setting standards of authenticity, being able to sort of come across as, can I say, cosmopolitan? Oh, that's nice. Where did you buy that? Where did you buy your clothes? That's kind of like what I picked up from what you're championing with the book. It's great. It's good. You can do this, guys. There's multiple options of getting the best out of yourself, but for the right reasons. To be more heart-centric with yourself and spending quality time, improving yourself. I think it comes down to that.
Yes, if you want to, and the great thing is it's a choice, and the choice is out there now, and as long as you know what's out there and what helps, what doesn't, what's safe, what isn't, then that's how we can help other men. I mean, there was the thing I get most asked about by guys in business is hair transplants. The number of friends of mine who are in the finance industry, and men are happy to talk about the fact they're cross about losing their hair, but as soon as you say or suggest some of the remedies, they look terrified. But there's two friends of mine during lockdown who had hair transplants. Because it was, if you could get an appointment, it was the best time to do it because no one was seeing anyone. And they are so happy, they feel transformed, and it's made them feel so much more confident. And you know what? Tons of people look great with no hair, and they're lucky. But those who don't or don't like not having hair, I was so happy that I was able to point these two people in the right direction, and they genuinely, and they're not naturally effusive people, wrote to me saying how happy they were that they'd had hair transplants, and it was just them knowing that it wasn't a particularly scary thing to go through, made them take the plunge, and now they're really happy with how they look, which psychologically will make them feel more comfortable in a work and a home environment.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's life transformation. It's transformative because it's affecting their, obviously their physical appearance is one thing, but the psychology of that individual shifts. They are just happier people because they're happier within themselves. And I think, once again, I think, and being candid, I think sometimes, I mean, Italy, I think Italian, obviously Italians are renowned for sort of grooming and looking after themselves, I believe. You certainly come across that way. I think us British sometimes are a bit behind the times on self-expression. I don't know whether you share that view, Jeremy, with your cosmopolitan hat on.
No, I think 100% right. I think we're going to start catching up. But yes, we were slow to the mark, and I think in a way there was a generation that grew up not knowing any of the sartorial rules, because sort of the kids who of the 60s and 70s, their parents sort of were rebelling against all the dress codes. They didn't really know how to do a bow tie or what a difference between a monk strap or a brogue was. So it sort of skipped a couple of generations, and now there's a whole new generation who are really interested in the rules, and then they want to break them. But you can only break rules when you know what they are in the first place. So there's a lot more knowledge now across the generations about sort of men's sartorial rules and what works and what doesn't, what makes you look good, what doesn't. Black is not particularly flashing as you get older. You're better sticking with navy. And there's all these little things that don't cost anything to know, but make a difference to how you look. So
very good.
It's just knowledge and choice.
No, excellent. So, Jeremy, tell me just a little bit more, outside of, what other interests have you actually come into the fore right now with your life? So you've done some really great things and you've been in some super environments. So tell me a little bit about what's going on in your world at the present moment, outside of obviously the book.
Well, I left Mr. Porter a week before lockdown, so it was and moved up to the Lake District. So I was so lucky that this is where we were for a year or so, surrounded by sort of lakes and mountains. And so that was quite a big life change from being in a giant office in White City to being in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in Cumbria. So I spent a year getting to know nature, nature to me had always been a pub garden in Camden. So right. To discover there was a lot more to the outside than that was quite an eye opener. And then obviously writing the book was a nice thing to do whilst at home and not being able to go anywhere. And then working on this brand that I'm looking to launch. But I found that the lockdown was scary, as many of us did, but also it was great getting a new perspective, wasn't it? Because not being in the office every day, not having, I mean, there were many stresses to be had, but there were different stresses. And I took up sort of hiking and mountain climbing and bought things called anoraks. And my friends cannot believe I own anything called a cagoule or an anorak. But climbing up a mountain and then looking down at the world, literally, really helped put things in perspective. I found it an incredible psychological help to go high up, see what nature's survived for the millions of years, and then see what we were going through last year and the year before. And you thought, this is terrible, but look, all this has been through worse and pulled through. And that speck of stress is now in the distance. And so climbing and hiking became a big thing for me over the last year for sort of mindfulness.
That's fantastic. So in some respects, it's been a blessing. You've achieved so much. You've achieved so much with that sort of kind of reset. So is the lakes now going to be a permanent feature in your life, Jeremy? Is this home?
Yes, this is our main home now. I mean, I'm in London probably once a fortnight. I come up for a few meetings and to see friends, but it really is. I mean, I did love office life. I worked in an office for 20 or nearly 30 years, over 30 years, and I loved it. The banter, the sharing, the creativity. I loved offices when everyone smoked in them, and you'd see people drawing on a cigarette and a brilliant idea coming into their head at the same time. And so, there's been so much changes in offices, and I have missed an office in some ways, but gained so much more without an office too. So, as with most people, I suspect.
So do you feel that spiritually you've developed with nature? Do you feel that this has a big impact on your outlook for the future, given, your journey over the last 24 months?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds so namby-pamby, doesn't it? But waking up every morning at home and walking around a garden, I had no idea that plants could grow so quickly or pop out the soil overnight, that nature was so tenacious. So that was an extraordinary, puts you in your place, to be honest. So it was a great thing to witness that. And then it just made you, well, as we all know, we're all having to care more about the planet. We're all having to care more about where we shop, how we shop, what we put in our food, what we put in our skin, how much we buy. Sustainability is a huge juxtaposition, but a huge fashion thing now. But you've got all these higher companies now, or resale platforms, and we used to call them second-hand shops, didn't we? Now they're resale platforms, which makes it sound a lot sexier. So we're asking a lot more questions about everything we do. I mean, we're going through, we've had a tough year or two, but we're going through an incredibly exciting period where technology is changing at breakneck speed, and yet our relationship with nature is getting closer at the same time, which you wouldn't naturally think would happen concurrently, but it is, I think.
I think so too. I completely agree, and I think you obviously you're in a very creative environment. I think nature does stimulate that gives you that calm mind to reset your thinking, and it does support that. But you're absolutely right. I think my vision of the future is, and it's an interesting one, is all around precision living. And that sounds a little bit robotic. Equally, I think there's a term I'm starting to put into my mind, which is called leisureization, where technology is now having a massive impact on how we live our lives at one end of the continuum, but not to lose sight of nature. And I can completely empathize with I think the relationship you've built with nature while you've been in the lakes, and obviously that's now obviously having quite an impact on how you're expressing yourself with that as well. So it's really nice to hear, actually refreshing, because I can imagine that it's sort of a high contrast in the London world that you've come from, and now you're in the Lakelands. There's almost like a little movie here somewhere, isn't there? The life and times. So with that in mind,
well, it is bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was sort of lucky because I was worried about having dreadful FOMO moving up here and missing all the parties and the fun. But luckily there were no parties and there was no fun when I moved up here. So I had a gentle sort of journey into leaving the metropolis behind.
Yeah. So do you feel good going into London? Obviously now once a fortnight, so to speak, and then good to come back. Is that sort of building that new relationship with the two worlds? Yeah.
Yes, I think I'm very lucky to be able to have those two contrasts. So when I arrive in London, I'm always excited that to have the work meetings and to see friends and to see the buzz that's come back into the city. It's a city I lived in for 30 years and loved very much. So I'm so happy to see the boards come off the windows and the tables busy outside the restaurants. But at the same time, after that few days and the train nears Oxenholme station and you see the mountains and the sheep and the green fields, and then it's a slower pace of life here, it's like taking a sort of visual Xanax in a way. It's sort of you look at a field and it's like you get a chemical relaxation feeling coming through your body. So I love having both. I think life's all about contrast, isn't it? And as many of those as you can fit in, the better.
Absolutely, it's variety, isn't it? It's I think we can get quite easily blinkered, and you've managed to balance it really nicely, which is great. So, as regards the future, the vision that you have for, obviously you've got the skincare range coming out in due course, and do you think with Vainglorious there could be another book on its way, or any thoughts around? You're building a community, if you don't mind me saying, steering advice and giving guys confidence through your steers. I know that you maybe never planned it like that, but is anything in the pipe coming that might be able to sort of capitalize on this sort of community you've built?
Well, I think so. I think with the skincare brand that I want to launch it, and it's very much about a community, a place where men can feel good about looking good and not be judged and ask the questions that I've talked about. And so it'll be a community as it will be a product line, if you see what I mean, genuinely. So that's going to be a really important part of the next few years. And then I've just started writing another book, but that's a book about a very different subject to the one I've written about before. It's about my she won't watch this, so it's fine. It's about my mother's many marriages. She was married, or she's married 5 times so
wow.
far. And I was from the first marriage, so it's going to be called Four Fathers, and it's about growing up with many different dads.
Wow,
he was a bit like Henry VIII, sort of divorced, beheaded, died, survived.
Well, I'm looking forward to the book already. That sounds fantastic. I mean, was that quite if you don't mind me saying, you've now opened it up, Jeremy, was that quite a turbulent time for you? Or, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. Yeah.
It was a turbulent time. I mean, her first husband, my dad, I didn't know. Her second husband died of alcoholism. The third one was taken bipolar but undiagnosed and taken away to a loony bin, as they called it in those days. And the fourth one, that marriage lasted about 6 months. So it was very eventful.
Wow.
First couple of decades in my life. So I think that fed a lot probably into my insecurity about how I look, and therefore my lifelong obsession's too strong a word, but what I've always wanted to do, whether it's my home or my job or my family or how I look, is try and make it as perfect as possible. And I hate to overanalyze, but a shrink will say that comes from trying to create calm and orderliness out of the chaos that you grew up with. So in a way, the two books are linked, but only analytically.
And clearly, do you feel a lot of therapy from writing the books?
Yes, do you know what? You do learn about yourself when you write about yourself and look at why you do things. So it's really interesting, and you know, everything that's happened. I mean, it's made the life that I've had, and I love the life that I've had, and I think that's why I've sort of worked at lots of magazines and set up Mr. Porter, is because I've loved creating worlds where everything looks nice and that everyone is happy in it. And you know, so if you take over a magazine that's not doing very well, I'll think, oh, right, come on, but this could be good. So let's sort out this mess. And I think sort of sorting out messes has sorting out messes. Maybe that's my epitaph. Yeah, not the most romantic epitaph, but something like that.
Well, that's good. I mean, you come across incredibly energized and very happy with life. And is it fair to say that that's the truth?
Yes, I think so. I feel very lucky. I'm very happy. I am always wanting to. I want this skincare brand to be the best skincare brand in the world. So that'll be my stress levels for the next year or so. And I want my next book to be the best book that has been written in the world. So I would say almost happy, but somebody who always wants everything to be the best. You're never totally happy, are you? But in a good way, perhaps.
Well, I think it feels balanced and well delivered, and you're making great strides with your life, but very interesting life. And, you know, obviously that you come across with some really good essence and, you know, very heartful. You know, as we run up to kind of conclude this, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's been truly authentic. And I think, as I say, my audience are, you know, professional business people that, you know, need to look good, if you don't mind me saying that. And I know they want to, but equally, I think we are in this time now where people are reflecting on, you know, longevity, the big subject of, you know, looking better, feeling better, looking after your health, given what's been going on in the world. But equally, that nice balance of people reaching out to nature, moving out of the cities. And you know, you've got a really good, you've endorsed that really well with your journey, particularly over the last 24 months. It's been quite eventful in that sense, you know, the moving from Mr. Porter to, you know, this it's been a high-paced 2 years for you. And as the skincare product actually, was that something you had in mind 2 years ago, or is this just something that's just come about?
I had, you know, weirdly, I thought about it 20 years ago, and it's so annoying that I didn't do it 20 years ago. And so every decade I think about, yeah, I did. Even had the name for it 20 years ago. But I think now's the time where we're having, for the first time, worked for myself, as in writing a book. I quite enjoyed it. And so I really want to create a brand that's mine, that I can mold very much in the way that I want to, which I was very blessed and lucky I was able to at Mr. Porter, because Natalie Massenet, who founded the company, was an amazing entrepreneur, but also an amazing visionary, and her work ethos and the way she treated people was extraordinary. So I learned so much there about how to work with people, as well as how to create a brand and how to have a dialogue with the consumer. And that's what I'm looking forward to bringing into this new business.
Oh, that's fantastic. Jeremy, with that in mind, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet and have this conversation. The book is amazing, vainglorious, I think. Yeah, and good luck with the skincare product. Dying to know about that, obviously, at the appropriate time. But it's been a tonic, a pleasure. And for our listeners and viewers today, just to say, Jeremy's a great guy. Read the book. You'll learn so much about looking after yourself from a number of perspectives. And yeah, what can I say? Just a big, big thank you. A true soulful entrepreneur.
Well, likewise. Thank you.